first question for the panel is, last year at II Connect, we asked, does cross-border advice have a future? We are all here. The question still stands. What does the future look like? And I'm going to go straight, we're going to go left to right on this one, because it was you, John, that came up with that question originally. Does it still have a future? Yeah, tell me your thoughts on this.
This working? Okay. Well, we're still here a year later, so that's a really good thing to announce, isn't it? Does it have a future? Yes, of course it has a future. When you're looking at this particular problem, you can only talk from your own perspective as running your own business. I think everybody has a different experience, but from our point of view, it is changing. We're seeing a lot of change in the way we deliver the advice, and AI is coming into the picture there as well. But the second part of that also, I believe, is we're seeing a change in how the advice is delivered by the advisor in the geographic regions within which we work. So we've moved away as an organisation from what we used to call in the old days paratrooping advisors into certain areas through seminars or whatever. And what we've done over recent years is very much invest in local offices, local businesses within the jurisdiction within which we're working, and getting local regulation wrapped around that. In the EU, of course, passporting works. We passport out of Cyprus into the various locations. But what's happened is that we've seen the local advisor models change, where our advisors now form part of the community within which they're working. So there are proper branches, there's proper infrastructure, and the advisors are part of the community as well. And I think that is one of the major benefits of being able to do that, particularly in the EU. You're forming a business, but you're forming a business which is seen as local, although it may have an international flavour like our particular group. Shall I pass it on to somebody else now?
You can pass it to Gav. You can jointly answer this question.
Yeah, I think the question stemmed last year because even though we all know that there's a huge necessity for international financial advice now, that can't get away from that, despite Trump pushing for deglobalisation, the world is becoming ever more transient. There's so much movement, and you've got those clients and individuals that need that advice, which is ever more complex. The issue that we have is the regulators, in terms of the different country regulators, very much being focused on their own domestic issues, because the international sector only forms a very small percentage compared to their domestic focus. Therefore, have they got the resource and the time to collaborate and have that joined up thinking? And they do collaborate, but in my experience, it's generally collaboration and understanding on the negative, on flouting the rules, where we've crossed, advisors are crossing the specific country regulation rules, as opposed to focusing on the positive, a route to market for internationals. So we really need to focus, or we really need to lobby. We had this discussion yesterday, didn't we, in terms of lobbying the SCA to focus on that joint collaboration. We need to find a route to market for those international investors, because they're left falling between the cracks, and it makes giving that advice ever so difficult. And the only way, as John just alluded to, is the only way I think we can overcome that is really provide local advice, but go in and collaborate with another advisor under a different jurisdiction, so we understand the rules and we can look at sort of both case scenarios. So
it's a good answer, Gavin. Passing over to Tom. First off, Gavin, you moved to Dubai to the DIFC with Blacktower, and Tom, you're based in Dubai. You've flown in from Dubai for this debate. When you look at the need for cross-border advice, and when you think of the number of people that are heading to Dubai from different countries, in particular this country at the moment, it's more prevalent than ever, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you know, it's clearly in the news, right? It's everywhere. Dubai seems to be growing at a very rapid rate. We're seeing a lot of individuals move overseas from the UK in particular at the moment as a result of some of the changes in tax legislation, and it seems to be a hot topic. I think John and Gav have summarised international financial planning incredibly well, and some of the struggles that we see right now, and a lot of the time local regulators and local tax jurisdictions make it very difficult to have a fluid international plan, if you like. You know, I think when you look at, we were speaking yesterday, weren't we, Gavin, take the EU bloc as an example. Ourselves at Skybound, we have a base out of Cyprus, and we passport across the number of jurisdictions that we do. But the products that are designed for individuals in the EU bloc today are very specific to the country in which people reside. And they don't necessarily transfer that well into other jurisdictions. So when you're giving advice to an individual, whether that be somebody in Dubai or somebody in Europe or somebody in the US, for which many of us have exposures in all of those regions as businesses today, you have to plan on a domestic basis with the recognition that someone is potentially going to leave that jurisdiction, and it's more important about how to transition that individual from one domestic proposition to the next domestic proposition. And I think, you know, John Gav pointed out very well there, that collaboration between advisor sets or advisors who have got that multi-jurisdictional licensing head on them and the qualifications to back them allows for that planning to be more prevalent than ever. I think gone are the days where a financial plan set for life, and that kind of obsession with you can take this anywhere, wherever you go mentality, because there are so many different tax jurisdictions to overcome today.
Now, I'm moving left to right, so we'll come to Mark in a moment. But JJ, you're in the UK. You've got an office in Liverpool?
Correct. Liverpool, Birmingham and London.
Liverpool's a growing financial centre. It's got to be said. Rachel is also got a thriving office in Liverpool. Just, you know, we've touched on Dubai. We're looking at the cross-border advice. You're UK-based. How do you see the rest of the world catching up? And is the UK the yardstick, or could that be improved?
I think you can look at the UK versus international in a couple of ways. The UK hasn't got it all right, for sure. I don't think it necessarily is. There's a lot of best practice from the UK. There's a lot of really good things that you can take from the UK. There's a lot of things from the UK that the UK's lost. So internationally, firms are typically better at growing. We've lost that a little bit in the UK, and we're scared to talk about sales and growth. So I think there are things that both sides can learn from. But I think, so I actually started in wealth management in the international space in Dubai 12 years ago. So I've always I've spent most of my time in the UK, but I've always kept a close eye on the international space. And when I started, it was very much domestic advice businesses and international advice businesses, very separate things. And you're starting to see now a lot of that gap being bridged. And there's big UK firms that are looking to explore the international space. SJP, a massive example. How successful they are doing it is a different thing. But there's a lot of international firms, Hoxton being one, looking to build out domestic businesses as well. I completely agree. I think I think given the challenges and the friction between different regulators and the ways of operating and the sort of solutions that are available to clients, I think you have to have a domestic business in each of the jurisdictions you operate, and hopefully the more businesses from the UK and international sort of bridge that gap and move back and forth, hopefully regulators start to speak with each other more and providers start to speak to each other more, and we get better solutions.
Thank you. Now, Mark, thank you for being patient. Just on some background about yourself, you've come into the advice world relatively late. Just tell us about that, and tell us about TEAM, because TEAM took over from or bought Global Eye. Is that right? And some other businesses as well. Take the floor, Mark.
Okay, so I'm really pleased to be here because it's bringing back old memories. When I established, along with 5 other fellows, a rather grandiose business plan that was based out of number 23 Portland Place with Sir Ronald Cohen above us and Apex being my shareholder, struggling with 30 credit cards maxed out, etc., etc. It brings back happy and not so happy memories. But so so I was an investment banker for most of my career. Sold the business in 2009 for a heck of a lot more money than we ever thought we'd get. But that's a question of right place, right time. But over that period of time, we built businesses with offices in 14 different major cities around the world. So I ended up in the advice world, partly out of frustration with my own wealth and how it was being looked after. And then partly, frankly, because retirement doesn't suit me very well, and I needed to do something with myself. And I thought, okay, I hate the word disruptor because I'm not a disruptor. Very few people are disruptors. Evolver. And I like turning the telescope around the other way and looking through the opposite end. I'm very Socratic. What does that mean? I question the question, not give an answer. So, first of all, I don't really understand what cross-border advice is, if it exists. I find it a really confusing term. I don't understand it. I mean, you've got a person or a family located in one place, they want to move to another place, or they've got offspring or relations or part of their family dotted all over the world. That's not cross-border. You're giving advice to the person in that jurisdiction relevant to the rules and regs of that jurisdiction.
But bearing in mind that they are going to move across borders.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's cross-border advice, though, is it? That's helping somebody with a plan. Because there's no such thing as passporting. But that's a whole other matter. I mean, do I think that there's a role for advice in the future for internationally mobile people? Absolutely. Do I think people are going to get more mobile as the years go by? I really haven't got a clue. And I'm rather fed up with the narrative, oh, all these millionaires leaving the UK and international advice is going to do brilliantly well. I'm not sure I believe that, actually. I think people just always have moved around. That's just the nature of human existence since we came out of the Drift Valley in Africa. So there's definitely a role. Clients are increasingly, potentially more global. They live their lives, they have their liabilities, they have their assets, they have their plans, they get divorced, they die, they lose their jobs, da. That was a song, wasn't it?
Da.
If you're old enough to remember. But what I do think is over is the days of cookie cutter advice. I think I agree with many of my peers on this panel. The regulations are changing, they're not harmonious, they won't change in sync, they never do, they never have, why will they in the future? So there's no cookie cutter. And I think that as an industry, perhaps what we're guilty of is telling clients that there is a cookie cutter. Here's a silver bullet. Here's a plan. Don't worry, it works because it's worked for thousands of other people. That's where I think that the industry needs to evolve a bit. So cookie cutter days over. I think that what's needed really, really, truly, and passionately is more accountability, more transparency, more risk assessment, more risk mitigation. I mean, for God's sake, have you ever filled out one of your own client questionnaires? I mean, the client has to give away everything. And yet most of us, apart from the team, because we're listed on the London Stock Exchange, we wouldn't be able to fill out our own client question. We wouldn't declare what our assets were. We wouldn't declare what our accounts are. We're not transparent half the time. So I think that the industry just needs to evolve. There's very much a place. I think there's a thriving place. I actually think clients will pay you more for responsible, transparent, respectful, audited, accountable advice. I actually think they'll pay you more. If we can get away from this sales-led cookie cutter approach, you know, we can actually generate better revenues, stickier revenues, more profitable revenues than a commission-driven industry. Because commissions are going to come down.
So Mark, just because one of the, so you took over, you bought Global Eye.
Yeah, and then sacked 90% of the firm. I just saw the other license.
And the proposition from Team now is what? Is it pure? Is it commission based? Is it a mixture? Is it fee based? How are you operating? Just briefly, because we'll have to move on to the next question.
Away from pilot hard, sell it cheap, advisor gets upfront commission, to a more responsible approach. So, question, which I suppose only somebody like me would ask because I'm not from the industry. I'm like, why does everybody sell life and wrapper products? Why don't you just sell the life bit separately and then have a investment management portfolio, right? Now, I'm sure there's a role for life wrapper products, no problem with that. But I just was wondering why it's always the default.
So you've asked a couple of questions there. I'm going to let the other guys answer. Just by the way, could everybody hear what Mark was saying? Because I noticed the mic was away from your mouth. No, it's switched on. Could you all hear Mark okay then? Yeah. Yeah. Just be aware of the microphone. Who wants hot potato from Mark? Take your pick. You can volunteer or I can select somebody. Gav?
Just to answer your last question there, Mark, you know, the products that are the wrappers are, a lot of these products are very suitable for those international, potentially repatriating clients. Everything that we heard here earlier, the benefits that these products can offer. Time portion relief, etc., etc. So that's a reason for the utilising those wrappers. The negative on the wrappers comes from the old commission structure, upfront days, but that's changed a lot. I think the whole industry, and as Jojo, you mentioned earlier, that gap has narrowed. We used to look at domestic advisors, UK advisors, as proper advisors. We used to look at the international advisors as salespeople. That's changed dramatically over the years, and with the complexities that we're dealing with now, I would say it's almost switched on its head, because you have to have an incredible amount of knowledge and experience to give a client the correct advice today, and to navigate the difficulties. And I think it was it Nathan that mentioned it earlier, and James alludes to the fact EU regulation. They love red tape. They love reasons to find why you can't do something. That they're not commercially minded in that sense. Not looking for routes to market. And we're always going to have an issue with these products, because even if they did collaborate and look at a scenario where they were all on the same track, we had a route to market, a lot of the international products based in the Isle of Man, Jersey, Guernsey, these types of products, they're regulated within that jurisdiction. So regardless of whether we have that joined up thinking, have a route to market, there's little attention given to these products, because the local regulators will realise that they don't have any reach or any real control of what happens within those products unless they have anything that goes wrong. Ombudsman would have to go to that jurisdiction to challenge. And that's why I think one of the reasons I think they sort of they step away from that scenario, and it's problematic.
Look, at no point did I say that there was anything bad with the product. And if you actually listen to what I said that there are plenty of good reasons to use those products. It's all about suitability and appropriateness. And so where my concern comes, because let me tell you the way I look at things. You know, I opened the box for my late brother, who had been advised by a financial advisor in the UK. He died very sadly, young, with two 16-year-old twins. And when I opened the box, I was absolutely horrified. So when I look at what we sell, and I hate the word sell, what we advise clients to consider, I always think that it's my brother or a relation or a best mate. And I'm not saying that anybody on this panel here is guilty of this, or anybody in this room is guilty of it. All I'm saying is that as an industry, you see, I come from a background, investment banking background, where if it's not written down, it didn't happen, right? And I'm just calling into question evidencing the suitability and appropriateness of the sale of certain products, which may be perfectly suitable and certainly appropriate. Who signs them off? How qualified are those people to sign them off? What actual qualifications they have to be an expert other than maybe level 4, right? And how well does the client and or the advisor and or the CIO signing it off understand the complexities of the inner workings of those products? Because I'm not sure that people do. I mean, I've just looked at I was asked to look at some litigation fund strategies. I've looked at structured products. I've looked at guaranteed return products. I used to sit in the room of investment banks who would be budgeting for the next Ferrari because they were putting together guaranteed versions of products or structured products. So I'm deeply cynical. Products have a position. Of course they have a position. We have an accountability problem, not on this stage necessarily, but there is an accountability problem in the industry as to how suitable, how appropriate, how well audited, how well evidenced is that advice. That's all I'm saying.
I think you've got a couple of really good points there. So, and I think we're on the same page. We've got to be a little bit careful. And I'm going to just talk about the European theatre as an example here. These products we talk about, let's call them life wrappers, because that's what they are. They have a place in the market. They work beautifully in combination with a platform for certain tax breaks in certain EU countries. In the EU, Portugal, Spain, Italy, France work under Napoleonic law. Forced heirship. These things are ideal for planning around those particular problems. And they also satisfy a marketplace where there is inadequate and immature personal pension planning. These things operate in that way because they offer significant tax breaks over a period of time. The problem you've had with these products, it's simply been the way they've been sold historically. It's all about the pricing and the charges surrounding the product. Now, you can take a product off the shelf and you could charge 30 or 50 bips for that product, total cost in, then your fees on top. The problem we've had historically in the European theatre, there's been no control on the distribution, so you've seen these silly commission rates that live with the client in charges forever. And then you try and break the contract and you go for a tax break. Unfair on the client. So it's the way that has been positioned by the industry historically. And I think we've got over that. I think now you're looking at a marketplace far more mature. MiFID has killed a lot of the bad guys out there, let's be frank. And what you've got now, products going into a marketplace, or what I like to term as advisor-agreed remuneration models. You're agreeing with the client understands what he's paying, and it is transparent in his documentation. When you do it that way round, these products offer a fantastic opportunity. They really do.
At no point, I repeat, at no point have I said all of these products are bad. No point whatsoever.
Mark, can I just, as the adjudicator, interject for a second? First off, one of the points that springs to my mind is you mentioned, you were almost talking about the word sell, or it's almost like if people are making money from financial advice, it's almost like a bad thing that happens. That's what I was getting from you. And you're sitting here as as an owner of a financial services company, financial advice company. It sounds, and I might be getting this wrong, that a little holier than thou, that you're kind of saying, we do things the right way. And let me just finish. And if you are doing things the right way, what is the right way? And then we'll pass to somebody else.
Well, first of all, I apologise if that's the impression, because that's not the impression I sought to give. Of course we need to make money, and there's a very good reason why we need to make money. We need to make money because we need to be able to invest to give the client a better journey, as they say. So no, I'm not being holier than that. And for the avoidance of doubt, I've been refreshingly surprised at the level of expertise, experience and knowledge that I've come across in individuals in the international market, not working for us, working for other people. They'll never, probably never come and work for us. So I actually think that there are a heck of a lot of really good people out there that somewhat get crowded out or drowned or tarnished by the bad actors. Of course we need to make money, and of course part of my role, because I've got shareholders to account for, including institutional shareholders, is to make money and the right return. So yeah, but I think that where we might be a little bit different, although I think all of us on this panel are moving more in this direction, which is more away from a sales-driven one-off, what I call ad valorem revenue stream, to more of an annuity stream, which is the annual advice fee, where you might have to accept a slightly lower margin on it, but you've got the longevity of those revenues. So I think the difference, to answer your question, is that we are probably more annual advice tilted. So if you take the Jersey businesses, there are no commissions. The advisors receive absolutely zero commissions. The clients pay an annual advice fee.
Yeah.
No, we have to make money.
So we're still on the first question. Thank you for that answer, and apologies if it sounded that
Just don't do it
using
again.
the term holier than now, it did come across that way a little bit. But can you pass the mic to Tom? Oh, you got one. Tom, you're based in Dubai, but you work for a company that is multi-jurisdictional. I've heard the term regulation brought up. How do you see regulation improving? What would you like to see improved? And is there a case for a global financial services regulator? Is that something that we, as an industry, should be pushing for?
Is that a wish for or a wish against? I'm not really sure about it. I think there's pros and cons to that request on both sides, and we all probably chuckle at it. I think the wishes from regulators, we sit across from many regulators every week, and if we look at, I think many of our businesses have this in common in terms of the US, the UK, Switzerland, Europe, the Middle East, and Far East. And every regulator is different, right? And every regulator is looking at different parts of our business. You look at the Middle East as an example, and you have regulators like the DIFC or ESCA as an example. ESCA regulate a lot of banks, and they don't necessarily understand some of financial planning aspects. MiFID is very investment orientated, and that regulation that sits around why a portfolio has been constructed in a way to match the needs of a requirement for a client. And MiFID doesn't really stand what financial planning is and all the work that we do prior to that element. So I think it's very difficult when you sit within a region and you do what we do as financial planners, which is to consider a holistic point of view for the client, and we map out client's journey, and we consider all elements of a client's life. And we do so much work before we implement for a client. And we do a lot of, back to Mark's point, we try and do a lot of that work in order to justify and ensure we have correct suitability. But to go back to Gavin's point, we're such a small part of what regulators look at because we're wrapped up in everything else. There isn't a regulator for a financial planner. In some regions, financial planning isn't regulated, right? It's the end result of what we do, which is investment management, or if we're providing life insurance to somebody, it's the implementation of life insurance that is regulated. So as financial planners, and JJ, you probably find this in the UK as well, there isn't a regulator for financial planning. There isn't a regulator for what we do. We end up having to face a regulator as a result of all the work that we do. And I think that's the frustrating part a lot of the time. And the regulator doesn't see past that end piece. And they don't necessarily take into consideration, certainly when we have clients with wealth in lots of different jurisdictions. The easy one to pick on is the continued debacle on UK pensions and who actually regulates that piece of business, and where it sits and how many regulators look at it. And I just go back to Gavin and John's point. It's like, I wish for us in the industry is that the regulators look at financial planning and understand it deeper and have a better knowledge of what we do in that sector of financial services. And then where there are these areas of, and Mark, I will say, I think there is cross-border advice in the fact that, when we have assets in multiple jurisdictions, I think that is true cross-border. Then there is a better understanding between regulators as to who's giving that advice, why they're giving that advice, and actually somebody is being held accountable for that advice in a region, whatever region it is. But I have an understanding between regulators that it is one or the other, and the client has absolute clarity for their own protection in that scenario. Because I think that's where a lot of downfalls come. And to Gav points on product, sometimes clients don't understand where their advice is being given from, especially when you're in an environment where you've got third parties, you've got two pieces of advice. If something goes wrong later on, etc., for whatever reason, where does that protection sit? So I think my ask and my want to regulators is really understand who we are and what we do as an industry, and financial planning being such a big part of it today. John?
Yeah, it's a really good point. In our group, the regulators at the moment are difficult. I've got to be honest with you. In our group, we have 9 regulated entities, so I'm interfacing with 9 different regulators at any one point in time. It's an absolute nightmare because none of them talk the same language, literally in technical terms. And what we're finding at the moment, particularly in Europe again, is that regulators don't understand us. They don't know what we do. Crazy example is if you provide a life wrapper in Spain, you've got to sell the life wrapper under IDD. If you give the investment advice in the life wrapper, that's MiFID. So you're hit by 2 sets of regulatory legislation on the one product. This is insane. The second part of this is that you talk to the regulator, and MiFID is MiFID, and the rules are the rules. But they will try and shoehorn your business into the rules as opposed to understand what you are doing. So we get treated like an investment bank or a forex broker. We're not a financial advisor. And there is this massive impasse in understanding between us and the regulator that causes the big issue. Do you want to come in on this for Dubai?
Well, just Dubai, EU, across the board, you make the point you make, John, in terms of how difficult this is becoming to manage, to give that advice to a client, and what gets scrutinised by the regulator. Because I think the original question goes, what are the regulators doing well, as well, so, and what would we like to see? On the positive side, these rules come into place. You can definitely see the barriers to entry in our industry that has been raised to a tremendous level. The level of advice, the knowledge, the type of advisor internationally that's out there now is a different breed to that of 10 years ago. And that's been pushed by the higher level of regulations, because if you can't keep up with that, you fall by the wayside. The adverse effect of that, though, for me anyway, in my opinion, you keep pushing that barrier up, the level of resource that it requires from an organisational point of view to manage and administer that is going through the roof, and all of a sudden it's not cost effective. Where we've now got to look at our client base, and there's been a lot of talk about high net worth clients, and that's what we're focused on. That we have to look at the higher up levels of AUM. It's very difficult now to take on a client, especially in the DIFC, for anything less than 700,000. That's what we're looking at, and the margins are driven down. Now, the danger of this is if we can only provide advice in our industry to clients above the 500 to a million and above, yes, they're the interesting clients. That's where we have to navigate difficult scenarios, and that's where it becomes interesting. But if we're only focused on that, we're leaving a huge gap of still high net worths.
Of course. Well, we've got
affluent, which was our original marketplace, that are being left without good advice, and this is driving advice underground to non-regulated products, and which is causing us issues because the regulators therefore tighten their regulate. It's a never-ending cycle. It's a vicious cycle that is going to sort of drive this industry. Someone has to come in and regulate the regulators and say, look, whoa, right, that's enough to a certain degree.
I like that, the regulator of the regulators.
Yeah, who's doing that?
Well, let me ask you a question, and I'll bring JJ in here because you're based in the UK at the moment. One of the things, this links back to the pensions debate earlier. I was listening, and 9 out of 10 people aren't going to have enough money at retirement. 9 out of 10. This is in the UK mainly as well that we were talking about, Rachel, wasn't it? So what's happened? We got a single regulator in the UK. We've got the single regulator, but we have got quite a wide savings gap. And the figures that you're talking about, Gavin, to me, that's the top 1% or 2%. What about the other 98%? And as an industry, JJ, you've come to the UK, you're seeing that. How do you get around that? And what advice can you, what can you give those 9 out of 10 that aren't getting the right advice and they've fallen through the cracks?
It's incredibly difficult. If Vanguard can spend millions and millions and millions on trying to set up a low value advice proposition and they failed, it shows you just how difficult it is. I think the difficulty is you need to have some margin somewhere. So you need to find a way to look after clients with volume in mind, be able to really efficiently get through. If you're going to properly advise clients, you need the time to advise clients. So you need that face-to-face time, which is challenging. So you need to come up with a solution that can answer the volume problem. And maybe, I think that it's only really becoming a possibility now with AI, with automation and being able to, put an annual review letter report together in 10, 20 minutes rather than taking a couple of hours to put a report or a presentation together.
And you guys have the app as well, don't you?
We do. Yeah, so that's a tool to be effectively allow you to see all of your assets in one place, which is great. It's a good starting point. And then we've got Wealth Flow in there, which is a cash flow planning tool, so people can start to project their wealth forward. So these are tools that help, but you need to get engagement on these tools as well. So you need to be able to push out content and educational content. I think content actually is going to be a very key thing for that space as well, to deliver why people need to engage with financial advice and why people need to save for retirement and the things that they need to do, because financial literacy is unfortunately very low.
So I think just to jump in, but you make a good point. In terms of the AI, especially in a domestic scenario where there are companies that can get away with that, just all on one platform, and the client can actually look at their investment proposition. It becomes a lot harder because there does need to be engagement when you're talking from on a cross-border basis. The exercise that we did earlier on, for example, quite a complex scenario. I sat there, listened, and then cheated. I went onto AI and on ChatGPT, I took a photo, put the questions in, and it came up with, you need to seek help from an independent financial advisor that understands both these areas and jurisdictions. So,
I like that.
I think as well for advice firms anywhere doing anything really with any client is if you don't use forecasting tools, you're going to find it really difficult to engage with people who aren't already engaged. And what the potential future problem might be, you're really going to struggle with engaging. If you just talk about the potential investment returns year on year, for someone who doesn't understand investing and what that means and what risk means and things like that, without showing them what the next 30, 40 years could look like with and without advice, with and without making those changes and doing those things, I think you find it very difficult.
Gary, I think what JJ's hit the nail on the head there, and AI is a very interesting place now for the industry. And obviously, we've had that talk earlier. I think AI allows us to build efficiency in the background that hopefully allows us to reduce these high numbers that are the barrier to entry, right? We have some areas of regulation where it's unfeasible to take clients on at a certain point, and the mass affluent market is by far an enormous market, and we've seen it in the UK where retail people have been left behind due to the pressures of the regulator, and people can't gain access to financial advice, and it's often those people that need that advice just as much as anybody else, right? In order to fulfill that gap that 9 out of 10 people are now suffering later on in life. So I think if technology can, and many of us on this panel have embraced technology to some degree in whatever fashion we've used it in our businesses, but I think we're all very passionate about technology to increase that efficiency, to aid the consumer. And I think, again, a big question for us as an industry, and I think collaboratively we should continue to work together more. You talk about regulating the regulators. I think that is effectively a panel. I think it is the industry that comes together to regulate the regulators. And the providers, and we continue to have to go back to providers and ask, we already have enough administrative challenges from a compliance perspective due to our regulators. We need more help from providers and solutions providers to make onboarding, to make client-facing journeys better, to ensure engagement is retained throughout that advice process. Because engagement is key, and JJ, you pointed out, the content that both ourselves and providers and others produce is what drives people to make those decisions. So, yeah, there's lots to think about, but technology is helping us, I think, massively now.
I think what's interesting about this particular panel, the fact that this is what you guys are doing. By being part of this panel, we're having the debate. We're looking at the issues that are out there. I want to come back to something Mark said, and Mark's been, I don't know if anyone follows Mark on LinkedIn. Mark put out a really excellent piece recently. You mentioned the bad actors that are out there, without naming specific names, because we have litigation insurance, but we don't want to test that insurance. But without naming names, the scammers that are kind of feeding on, if the route to advice is too high, the other 98% are kind of just prey for scammers. They're also prey for things like cryptocurrency, which is, probably everybody that's an advisor now has to know a little bit about cryptocurrency because people have got the FOMO. Well, Mark, you just tell us a little bit about the article that you wrote, because a number of people applauded you for coming out against the scammers. And what can we do as an industry, and I'm including ourselves as publishers of financial services titles, what can we do as an industry to stop these scams before they happen?
First of all, which one? Which article?
Well,
sorry.
Take your pick.
Was it quite recent?
Yeah, it was quite recent.
Was it the one about the mob that went bust?
Something
that
with
did,
numbers.
litigation finance.
Yeah, numbers were involved in
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah, and very sadly, I've since found out that I got an incredible response to that thing, which I was rather surprised about because I thought it was rather dry and boring. I since found out that 3 of the 5 directors, when I went into Companies House, because this is what I do, I'm a bit sort of anarchish. So I go into Companies House and I delve in and I look at everything. You know, I find old companies that were associated with individuals and I look at the accounts. I pay my full fee to have full access to Companies House, which is a complete treasure trove. And they've done it before, not just once, but 3 times. And I think that lepers don't change their spots. So what the industry can learn from that is that I think, you know, to use a soccer parlance, it's a straight red. Personally, I'd be more than happy if the industry got together, just had its own. Back in the old day in the stock exchange, we had what was called a mutual reference society, which was run by the stock exchange and administered by the stock exchange, where bad actors were recorded and they were in a card, in a files of cards, and you could always go and look up somebody. And I really honestly think that we can't rely on regulators. If you think regulators are going to do anything, I mean, think again. I've been working with regulators for 40 years. You know, it's just the policemen get younger and more stupid. I think one of the things we could do as an industry is all club together and have a mutual reference society. It could be a digital format where individuals that are involved in scams, individuals that are involved in bad products, individuals that have been found to fail an ombudsman's findings get recorded. And it's in the quasi-public domain. There's no litigation problem there. There's no defamation problem there. Just record the fact that they were involved in a company that was dissolved. It's there in the public domain now.
Are you saying that any company that's been dissolved is
The directors of that company, it should be recorded by the industry that those individuals were associated with a company that was dissolved. It doesn't necessarily mean to say they were bad actors.
Have you ever been part of a company
No.
that was dissolved?
Never.
No.
Never.
It's interesting though. There are companies that go bankrupt. There are companies that fail and learn from their mistakes and come back. That could, if you're doing a catch-all situation where your company's been dissolved, you're almost bad as a result. That could be a problem.
The All Stock Exchange Mutual Reference Society, it was merely recorded that you were involved in some bad behaviour. Didn't stop you carrying on. It just was there, so people are aware that you had.
Well, that's one solution. I'm glad that you've put your hand up there because I'm conscious that we've gone past 4 o'clock. I'd like the engagement to be in the room. So, Rachel, have you got a question for the panel? You got a point to make? Dan, could you get a microphone for Rachel, please?
I was just going to follow up on your collaboration point around scams and bad actors. So this is less about disclosing company or personal names, but the pension scams industry group, PSIG, they already have a log where all of the pension scheme administrators and trustees will share knowledge, and there is a list of known scams or scam actors. And it feels like the financial advice profession could absolutely collaborate. So it feels like there are probably other industry bodies around the globe in different jurisdictions that if we were a little bit more proactive about connecting the dots and all got our heads together with a collaborative list, that would help.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a superb idea. I mean, if I wasn't busy doing what I'm doing at the moment, I'd almost put it together myself. And, you know, technology today and databases and search engines, it would be a pretty straightforward thing to set up. And I can tell you now, right here, evidence it right now, somebody wants to set it up, TEAM will contribute to the financial cost of setting it up. Right? There you go. That's on the record.
There's an II exclusive. An II exclusive. This is what it's all about. I'm getting the helicopter, so let's keep it to the questions from the floor. Hands up if anyone's got any questions for the panel in the first instance, please. Anyone with any questions?
I don't have a question. It's more listening to how it sort of works in the Middle East in terms of regulation. Having worked in Singapore for 20, 25 years in the regulated market, the MAS actually regulate financial planning. And we don't really do too much about the investment advice because everyone's accredited and it's self-declared. So it's almost the reverse, I think, from what you guys provide. People can't speak to each other.
Yeah, and I think that's the trouble with the regulators, right? We sit across many regulators, and as a collaborative here, there's probably not many regulators we don't sit across from. It's the frustration of having to deal with lots of different regulators doing lots of different things, different ways, and when we're trying to plan as a business, it's very difficult when you go from one regulator to another who just has a completely different opinion or a different language, as John says. And it's sad, it's frustrating because it makes it difficult for us as a business. It increases our compliance costs, and ultimately the consumer is the one that pays that price and is detrimented to as a result of it, right? So it's interesting. It's great to know that some regulators think like that.
I think Singapore's one of the good ones, and they also, just after IDR, they went out and basically reduced commissions massively across the board. Really started to change sort of habit as well.
Thank you for that point. There's just a final sum up. Say that again? Really quickly, because we've literally only got a couple of minutes.
I'll see you after.
Yeah, we've got some drinks waiting upstairs. But and we keep this to a bullet point, but I've just got one question for everybody on the panel. What do you love about being part of the advice world, and what would you change if you could? Now, this is probably impossible for you to answer it in 30 seconds, but I'm going to ask you, Mark, first, what do you love? What would you change if you could? Succinct, quick answer, please.
What do I love? I love puzzles. I love crossword puzzles, any sort of puzzle, anything that's technically challenging.
What would you change? If you've got a magic wand.
Transparency. I think.
JJ, over to you. Thank you, Matt. What do you love about this industry, and what would you change? Quick answers, please.
Love the constant change and challenge. What you need to sort of adapt and evolve with. Something I change is, and this is UK too, having people leave university wanting to be a financial advisor, financial planner, and raising the sort of standards in the profession.
Over to you, Tom. What do you love? What would you change?
I love the people part of this job, and helping the consumer. What would I change? So hard, so many different entities, so many different regulators. The desire for people to engage in our business and ultimately change people's want to learn about financial education, I guess.
Good answer. Gav?
I think we're probably one of the best industries in the world where we can really make a positive effect on a client's future. That's a great part of the job. What would I change? Better commonality across the regulators, to make this job or to make the process a lot more efficient than it currently is.
The regulator. And finally, John?
Yeah, the bits I love really, I suppose, are working with the team we've built and, the camaraderie we have in the group and watching how to evolve and grow. That is very rewarding for me. What would I change? Probably the way we recruit for the industry, the way we bring people on board. I would like to see that more of a structured approach to people coming in, like a doctor or a dentist or whatever, bring the kind of person into the industry that really has a feel for it and understanding.
Well, on that note, I think that's a really great way to end. I just want to thank all of you guys for being part of the panel. Most of you have flown in to this debate from all around the world. Incredibly grateful for the engagement, and please let's keep doing this. Let's keep talking, and let's see if we can change the industry for the better. And that brings II Connect to a close. The bar is free and it is open upstairs. Big round of applause for our panel, though, please. Thank you very much.